In the previous video, we started work on our calculator application, and as you can see on the screen, we added a title and we added two fields where the user of the application can enter some numbers. What we need to do now is actually add some buttons. We need to add a plus sign or a plus operation. We're going to be using a button for that. Also for subtraction, division and multiplication. Firstly, let's just actually make sure this is actually working. We're going to run it in the emulator. There's no reason why it shouldn't work, but we'll run it anyway just to make sure. Okay, select the running device. I've got it running already. And if I tab over, you should see that it's running. So at the moment we can click into there. We can type in some numbers if we want to. But obviously there's no buttons. So what we're going to do is add some buttons across here below the two fields. And we want to also below that add some mechanism to actually show what the result of the operation is. So let's go and make a start on that. Going back to Android Studio. So what we did first, if you recall in the previous video, so I'll just get rid of the screen down the bottom to give us a bit more space. We used the concept of a linear layout, and as you can see in the screen there in the top right hand corner, vertically. So the fields that we were adding were going from top to bottom. They weren't going left to right. But we want to actually add 4 buttons now going from left to right. So to do that, we can't do that with the linear layout we've actually got. What we need to do is add a second linear layout, which is actually a horizontal one, and then add the buttons within that. And this is the concept that Android allows you to do. Is you can have layouts within layouts, and you can build up very complex interfaces by doing that. So what we're going to do is actually come over here to linear layout horizontal. Going to select that. I'm going to drag that. And again, looking carefully, you can see where it's going to be added. We're selecting the green bar down the bottom, which means it's going to be added to the bottom. And you can see that it's been added firstly over here in the component tree, but also on the screen. So what we want to do now is add our buttons to it. And because it's a horizontal linear layout, as we put the buttons in there, we should see them coming in from left to right. And this can be a little bit tricky, but to actually get the button in the right place, firstly we'll select the button. Now, if we go and try and put the button where the green line is, and if we let the button go, over here you can see it's not actually within the linear layout. What we need it to actually be, I'm just going to drag that to show you. We need to go and select it till the linear layout is red and then release it. And you can see how it's indented. And when it was indented, you can see subtly now it's within the linear layout. So if I select the linear layout by clicking it, you can see the buttons within that. So there's a couple of ways to drag buttons, and we're going to actually need 4 buttons here. So the way you could do it is, as I did it there, to try and get it in and then move it. Alternatively, now that we've got a bit more space, we can actually just add a simple one. We can just go just there directly and add it. And because it's a horizontal linear layout, it's going to add the button for us automatically. But we can also just literally come over here and drag straight to the linear layout. And what you want to do is you move it until you can see that little black underline. I'm not sure whether you can see it too well here, but until it's actually highlighted, you won't be able to release the button. It won't actually move to the right place, but you can see there now, I think you can maybe just see a touch of it. If I release the button, it's going to move it directly under, as you can see there. So that's just another way of actually doing it. And another little trick here is, as you can see, we need to add one more button, and there's not really enough room here. So if you're actually looking to do this and it's getting a little bit hard to manipulate things while you're setting up your interface, you can come up here and click on this little button up here, and the actual toolbar text says go to next state, and that actually will move this and flip the screen to a landscape mode, like so. And by doing that, it can be a lot easier. You can just grab the last button and actually drag it and put it in there, and you've got a bit more room. So that's a good way of doing things. And what we'll do now that we've actually added those, we're going to actually add the text for each of the buttons. I'm going to just double click it, and I'm going to make the first one the plus sign. Second one is going to be the minus sign. Third one, the divide sign. Then the last one, the multiplication sign. Now obviously you can see that the buttons are auto-sizing based on the amount of text. And because we've now freed up this space, we should be able to click on this go to next state and go back to portrait again and find that it lines up quite nicely. And it's actually fitting and looking quite good. Now, as with the case with the other linear layout where we had this sort of bluish background, we can come over here and click on the layout, and we could change the background color if we wanted to. So I'm going to actually do that and actually just change it. So just come here into background, click on the 3 little dots as we did before, and click on color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on white with a white background just so you can sort of see what it looks like. I'm going to click on that, but you could change this to literally any color as you've done before. Click OK. And we can now see that the actual background of the linear layout is there. And that just really gives you a bit of a better view of what's happening in the background there. So that's our 4 buttons, as you can see there. Now, the other thing you could have done, which I didn't show you, we go back to the text mode. You can actually, what we could have done is we could have actually copied the first button, done something like this, copied. I've just copied that, and I could have actually pasted it in there like so. And we'll get an error because I'm trying to use the same ID, and that's one of the things you have to do whenever you're creating another view to put on your interface, onto your screen. The IDs need to be unique, but if we just put something like button 5, we can see we've got duplication there. We've actually got 2 there. So that's just another way of doing things if you don't want to be dealing with the design interface. Pretty well everything that, as I've mentioned a number of times now, anything you can do in the text mode, you can usually do in the design mode. Pretty well everything. There's a few things you can't, but it's pretty close, and vice versa. I'm going to remove that again. And you can see as I remove things, it very quickly does get updated by Android. So it's pretty cool that you can actually switch the state to either as and when you need to. Now, the other thing I want to point out, I'm not sure that we can see these too clearly, but there's actually some warnings that have come up by Android Studio with relation to these buttons. Well, there's actually a couple. There's one here in this edit text. If you just scroll up, actually, it's not the edit text. There's actually this one here. It's the text view. And I can hover over that, and then just when I hover, then I just move my mouse over and click on more. It'll actually tell us what the error is. And it's talking about hard coding string, enter 2 numbers, should be using a string and at string resource. We'll get back to that one in a minute, but the other one I want to point out now is the errors relating to the buttons. And the first one here is this first button there. So if I click on and just highlight that and then move over and click on more, it's actually suggesting that we actually use a style for this button. And it's actually saying buttons in button bars should be borderless. And we actually don't want to do that in this scenario, but what I want to do is actually do that anyway, just to show you what it would look like. But one of the other things you can do that I want to also show you while you're in the XML mode, and this works for the actual code as well, is you can come up here to the navigate menu, and it's not highlighted because I need to be clicking back in there, but I just want to talk to you about the next highlighted error and the previous highlighted error. So you notice on the Mac it's F2 and then Shift F2. So that will actually take you through these errors. So what we can do is go back into that mode again. So I'm just going to start up here, and I'm going to press F2 on my Mac. And actually press F2. What I need to do is actually press the function key in F2. I've got a function key, so hold on function and press F2. You can see I got it right this time, and it's actually showing the error, showing what I've actually typed. But that'll take you step by step to the next one. So I can continue holding it down and just press F2, and you can see it's actually moving down to the file and actually moving to the area within the actual view where it thinks there's an error. So I can just go back there, and I can press Shift F2 to go back to if I wanted to. But if I go back to the first button, and what I'll do, just to make a bit more room here, I'm going to actually just close the preview temporarily. Come up to here and close that. And what we can do again, getting back to this again, holding down function, pressing F2 on my Mac, and go through and cycle through these errors. And what we can do in this particular case, we really don't want to set this string resource as the same, but we can actually click on this button, and we've got an option. We could actually suppress the error. So that actually adds tools ignore equals button style, and that's so the warning doesn't pop up anymore. But we can also click on the edit. So we click on edit. It actually gives you a little bit more information about what the error is. And what we can do, just to show you why we don't want this, we can click on this little bit here. We're going to copy this and paste this into one of the buttons just to show you what it looks like. So I've copied that and OK that. And I'll bring back the preview again. Because if we try and add this to one of these buttons, it just doesn't look right. So we'll paste it in there like so. And you can see that we've actually got, it actually removes all the dark there. So it's just actually there by itself. It's just a plus sign sitting in there. So we actually want this to be looking like a button. And by adding this little bit of code, this button style, button style, that's actually removing that. So even though that's their recommendation, we don't actually want that to happen in this case. So I'm going to remove that again. So for now, we could actually ignore that error. And again, if you wanted for the error to actually not come up anymore, you can actually go back and click on that button. When it came up again, the button that you saw previously, and you can click on suppress if you didn't want to see that error. So that's the first message, but there's also a second one, and that's actually on this line. And the second one is dealing with something else completely, and that's dealing with the string resource. Now, I want to go briefly in and talk a little bit about what that string resource means, but we don't actually need to change it to the plus and the minus and the divide and the multiplication, because they are pretty well universal symbols. But this has got to do with making your application work in many languages other than just English. So at the moment you can see, if you come back here, the one we really want to change that would be appropriate to change would be the first one where we've got this message, enter two numbers. So ideally it would be great if we could run our application and for an English audience, come up and it will say enter two numbers. For a French audience or a German audience or whatever, for it actually to show a message in that particular language. So this is what the error is that Android's actually complaining about here, and it's saying, well, look, you've hard-coded the text to be enter two numbers, so therefore it can't change this for us automatically. So there is a mechanism built into Android for us to be able to change that. So what we can actually do is click on this little button here, and for this, because we're actually on that line where it's got Android : text, we can actually click on extract string resource. So we can actually go through and actually fix this and click on that. And what happens is Android will say, okay, well, what is the resource name? So we're going to call this help_instructions. And you notice it's actually got the file name strings.xml and it's got the values. So I'm going to show you what that means shortly, but for now we're just going to click OK to that with values selected. You'll notice how the text has now changed. Before it actually had the actual text. Now it's got the @string / help_instructions. So this is now like a pointer to an actual file that's actually got that message. So we can go into the values folder. We can click on into strings. And if we have a look there, we can actually see now we've got help_instructions enter two numbers. And as it turns out, the name of the application, Hello World, which was in there initially, which is from the string that was first created from the application, which has now been deleted. So we can actually delete that because that's no longer needed. Delete that altogether. And action_settings is from the settings menu within Android Studio. But the point is now we refer to the actual text that we want on the screen using this help_instructions. And the great thing about it is if you just go back to our file and confirm. So at the moment it's showing enter two numbers. If I then go back to the strings.xml and I say enter three numbers, entering the word three there, when we go back to activity_main, it now says enter three numbers. So in other words, it's looking up the contents of what's in that strings.xml file and actually putting that in there automatically for us. So the advantage of this is ultimately what you would do, and we'll talk about this in a later video, and it actually tells you up there the edit translations for all locales in the translations editor, and we'll talk about that again later on in the course. But the bottom line is it's very simple now to actually add translations for other languages and for them to be automatically shown on the screen by Android. Any ones that you actually add in other languages at runtime, Android will do that for you automatically. So as long as you're referring to the actual text that you want displayed using that format, and again, if you go back to our activity_main and look in the text mode because it's easier to see, if you're using this format, &string and then a / and then the name that we've assigned to it, it's automatically going to change that to whatever language you're using. So it's pretty cool. So that's what that error was. Android was sort of saying, well, you should really be using that in the proper format. So I'm changing that one there just to show you how to do it. But in the case of the plus, for these fields, for the buttons, it really doesn't make sense because it's most likely going to be the same thing for all languages anyway, or certainly for many languages. So I'm not going to change those. Okay, so moving on. So our interface is now starting to take shape. So we've got a mechanism to enter the two numbers. We've got operators, so we can actually choose whether we want to add, divide, subtract, or multiply. But we need somewhere for the actual results as well. What we really want to do is put a heading below that which sort of says the result, and then actually another one, another location that's actually got the result. So the result of whatever we've done with these two numbers, adding, dividing, etc. So what we want to do is go back to design mode. We're going to add a few more views. So what we're going to do first is we're going to add a medium text. Come up here to medium text. I'm just going to add that. And notice how you have got some options. You can actually just decide where it's going to go. So if you actually know you want it centered ahead of time, you can actually put it in there. But if you don't choose one, you can then override that later if you want. But in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move it again and center it. And what it's doing, you can see with the gravity, if you look at layout gravity, so I'm moving that around. Notice how it's actually moving. It's taken the gravity off, so in other words, it's defaulted now. But if I move it over to the right, gravity's right, and if I move it back again, center, horizontal, etc. So pay attention to these properties as you're moving things around because it can be quite handy to actually see what's going on there. So I'm going to leave it on center, horizontal. Obviously, I could have actually just gone in there and done that manually myself. So I'm going to change this text, and we're actually going to refer to that as the result. So that's going to be the result of our operation. like so. And then lastly, what we want to do on this interface is we need to add another text view. In this case, it's going to be a larger one, and that's actually going to physically show the actual result. So what we're going to do is actually just drag through a large text. And I'm actually going to left justify that and put it on the left-hand side there. I'm going to change the text for that to 0.0, which is going to be the default amount as you would normally see on a calculator. Now this actually brings up an interesting question, because the text that we've actually got hard-coded like this, which isn't going to change, it's good to actually just set that up ahead of time. But in the case of this field, if you think about it, if we put, we need a mechanism to actually automatically change and center things as that value changes, because obviously depending on the amount that's been entered and the type of operation, it'll stretch, wider and shorter and so forth, and it'll take more space up on the screen. So what you really want to do is try and work out an efficient way to sort of help Android out, so it's not doing as much, it's doing the minimum amount of work that it needs to actually achieve this. Now, it's not really an issue here now because we've got such a simple interface, but when you're building up a complex application and you've got maybe 30 or 40 views or more on the screen and it's quite complex, it can actually affect the operational time. So what you really want to do is try and help out Android as much as you can by setting things up to make it a little bit easier. So rather than getting Android to have to figure this out and each time and put it in the middle like we've done there, it'd actually make more sense to actually get it to use the entire space, and then that's to actually center the text within that entire space. It's just like a lot less work for it to actually deal with. So to do that, what we need to do is we want to click on that, which we've got selected. We want to go and change the layout width. We want to change that to match parent. So match parent is the setting that we want. So that then stretches it out to use the entire space. And because that's going to be permanently assigned now, that is more efficient in terms of Android, because it doesn't have to redraw the whole thing. It knows that it's got a finite amount of space for this particular Android device. So it's really going to make things a lot easier. Then, of course, the only other thing to do to center it, we need to go back and actually just change the actual property for gravity to center. So we just go down and scroll down, gravity, click on that. I'll just make a bit of space here, and click on center. Once we do that, we've got our value that's actually in the middle, and probably be more correct, we'll put 2 decimal points there, 2 zeros, like so. So that's really a more efficient way of doing things. And we're getting towards the end of this video now, but what we probably want to do is move this down a little bit. So let's click on the result, and we'll actually add a bit of space. We're going to change the margin. So we're just going to go up to the margin again, expand that out and change the top. And let's say add 20 density pixels to that. And notice how it all moves down. So it's not just affecting that, it's obviously affecting the view that's below that as well, which is pretty cool. And while that's been happening, of course, the text tab view will show all the updates that have been taking place, and all the various changes that we're making have been added to this. So it's pretty cool. Let's close it briefly so we can see some of the code a bit better. Again, you're able to swap to either if you want to. In the case of that most recent change that we actually made, if you scroll down and have a look, you'll notice it's this line here, the layout underscore margin top 20 dp. But also take a look at, we've got the initial linear layout that we started with. We've also got this second linear layout, and this is sort of the linear layout that's within a linear layout, so to speak, and that was the horizontal one. So all this code has been added automatically by Android Studio for you, but you are free to come in here and edit it if you so desire at any time. And later in the course, you'll see that I'll probably be spending more time in this text mode because it's ultimately more powerful, but to a large degree, it is personal preference as to which way you want to go. All right, so let's just run this and see what happens. We should find that it'll be able to run okay. Tab over what's starting, and we've got our interface now. So obviously we can type some numbers in there, add plus. So ultimately what should be happening if I type plus, that should actually come up and sum the two numbers and actually put the result in there. But obviously we haven't actually hooked up any code yet. So while we've got the interface starting to look a little bit like a calculator, we haven't actually added any code so that when those buttons are clicked, that some processing happens. So we'll be doing that in the next video. But just before we actually finish off, going back to our interface, going back to our code again, what we've actually done, so go back into design, and I'll just close off the Android window down the bottom. What we probably should have done is used small buttons, because they actually look okay. You can see that they seem to be perfectly centered, but they probably won't fit on the screen, all the screens in the emulator properly or on a physical device, because the buttons are really too big. Now, this is more of a problem actually with Android Marshmallow because that seems to automatically set some default margins of paddings. So what we really want to do is add or change the style for those buttons to be a small button. So what we could have actually done initially was actually just drag this small button over, which would have dragged the button and changed the style to a small button. But what we're going to do is, again, just more or less to show you how to do this manually, we're going to go in and do that in the text mode, or text tab, I should say. So we're going to go to each button, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add the style. I'm going to style equals %Android, and you can see Android's starting to help us there. attr/, we're going to go with button, style, and case is important here, small, like so. And I'm going to do that for all of them. So I'm going to copy that one line. I'm going to paste it at the end for each one. A little more space here. We'll do it to the last two buttons. Then we'll go back just to see what it looks like so. And by the way, if you're looking at the XML and it's looking a little bit, you'll find after a while as you're actually entering and changing XML code, it gets a little bit messy. You can actually come up to the code menu. You can actually select Reformat Code and just click on OK. And that actually reformats it all for you automatically, and it indents it and just makes it, it just pretties it up a little bit. So feel free to do that, and don't be too concerned about lining things up perfectly for yourself. Android Studio has got the mechanism to do that for you automatically. Okay, so we go back to design now, and notice how the buttons have changed. Because we've actually specified they're small buttons, obviously they're occupying less space within there, and it's more likely to fit better on more devices. But of course, the next issue is they're all now to the left, and that's because we didn't actually set initially the actual linear layout's gravity to center. So if we do that now, we do that by either clicking over here, not clicking on a button, making sure that linear layout horizontal was actually selected. And what we want to do is change the gravity, which hasn't got an option, to center. Once we do that, you can see the buttons are actually centered, and we're good to go. And if you wanted to, again, you could come back here and you could actually change the color. If you weren't happy with the background color, you could actually go back and change that if you wanted to. You could actually just delete that out of there, enter, and that might look a bit better without the background. But I just wanted to point out to you how you would actually set the background color. So that's certainly optional. But at this point now, we've actually finished with the very basic interface. So I'm going to stop the video here. And in the next video, what we're going to do is actually start hooking together some of the code so that when we actually start pressing these buttons, it actually works. So I'll see you in that next video.